Let's get the chat going. Let me just check one or two things. We'll be ready to roll. Thanks very much for everyone tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. Honored. Fun day. Let's just make sure that the live draft tweet is out and make sure that we're ready to roll. We are. All right, let's do it. Comes down 3, 2, 1. It is Locked On Jazz for Draft Day. November 18th is Draft Day. We're going to take your questions. The Jazz have made a deal. Why did they do it? They slide down in the draft a few places. They grab a second-round pick. Who are the players that are available? What did they just do? We'll talk about it. It's all coming up on today's edition of Locked On Jazz. Pow! How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan. Tonight, Chad Ford returns to the NBA draft. Chad Ford will join me. We'll do a live show right here on all of these same channels, and we'll have Chad Ford back on the NBA draft for the first time in 3 years. God, so excited to have Chad back as he returns. So make sure you join us on Locked On Live tonight for all the breakdowns. Chat rooms are open. We are live on Twitch. We are live on Facebook. We are live on YouTube. We are live on Periscope. And we want your questions open. The news starts of the day. The Utah Jazz have traded the 23rd pick of the NBA draft for the 27th pick and the 38th pick. I'll be honest. I actually think the key to this is the 38th pick. You save a little money, 23 to 27, that actually matters. The 38th pick is pretty interesting because I had heard mixed reports on whether or not you're going to be able to move up in the draft. I had heard yesterday earlier this week for the first time there were enough teams with financial constraints that you're going to be able to buy second-round picks. Last year, it had become suddenly very, very difficult to buy second-round picks. There's only so much money you can use for these picks. There's rules against it, and the picks have become more valuable than the dollar value you could spend on them. And so teams were having a really hard time getting those picks. So that's a pretty good move by Dennis and Justin in the front office to be able to go grab that pick. The other thing, just from a salary cap standpoint, depending what they do with Nigel Williams-Goss, Rajon Tucker, Jerel Brantley, Juwan Morgan, and Mia Oni, is the second-round pick's actually cheaper than Rajon Tucker or Nigel Williams-Goss. I think we need to remember those guys today because I do think when the Jazz are making their pick, we talk about a Desmond Bane or a Josh Green. You better be completely convinced that that player is much better than Mia Oni. Because if you draft somebody at the exact same spot, in the exact same position and does the exact same things as Mia Oni, you are deciding one or the other. It's very difficult to develop both of them at the same time, get them both time, give them both opportunities. So you better be pretty certain whoever you're drafting is better than Juwan Morgan, better than Jerel Brantley, better than Mia Oni, because whoa, it is so windy up here today. Like the house is going to blow away. I am like Toto is going to come into my room here in a second. Wow, that is crazy. Anyway, sorry about that. So you better decide that. All right, let's walk through it. At 23, we've talked about a lot of players over the last few weeks. If you're just joining us for draft coverage, welcome to the show. We do this show every single day. Locked On Jazz, it's your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. If you listen twice a week, please listen 3 times. If you listen 3 times, please listen 4 times. If you listen once every few months, make it a part of your regular day. We'd really appreciate it. All right, so what did the Jazz do? I think the Jazz took themselves out of the play on a few players, okay? One, if any of this previous group, Pokashevsky, Tyrese Maxey, that kind of group that's in the mock draft area of 15 to 20. After Killian Hayes, it seems like the R.J. Hampton, I think, is in that group. I think Sadiq Bey is in that group. The Jazz took themselves out of that. Okay, so the Jazz are out of the realm on that because I think that they're not going to. There was a chance. There've been various boards we've seen in which people could slide to that 23rd pick, they're not going to probably slide to the 27th. That's really all you did. Chad Ford's NBA big board had, some of those guys like RJ Hampton going 12th, Tyrese Maxey going 16. So he had it pretty high. At 23, he had Jerel Terry out of Stanford and Josh Green at 25. And then at 27, he's got Cole Anthony. So you may, and Chad's pretty connected. If we go to the ESPN mock draft and take a look at that for a second, what is 23? Now the Knicks, they have an Isaiah Stewart. They've already updated it impressively. Pokashevsky was at 22, and the players they now have the Jazz deciding between 24, Leandro Ballmero out of Barcelona. He's a 6'7" guard. He passes it really well, didn't shoot it well. 25, Desmond Bane's still on the board. 26, Trey Jones, who's really picked up a little bit. He was the ACC Defensive Player of the Year. He's Tyus Jones' brother. He had a very good shooting year one year and not a very good the other. 27, the Jazz taking the flyer on Jaden McDaniels, the Washington prospect, great body, 6'9", 210. You just, you can't get that body. It's my personal, I love Robert Woodard for that. That's what I love about Robert Woodard. You just can't get that body. Jaden McDaniels has the exact same thing going for him. Zeke Njai, the center, at 28. Theo Maledon, now at 29, according to ESPN, and Terrell Terry on the board at 30. So Terry still kind of bounces around. There's not, the step back, I really think Josh Green might be the one player who may or may not have been at the board at 23, who you've been looking at, we've been talking about, who's suddenly off the board. I don't think there's actually a lot more. I think there's a chance that Desmond Bane could still slide. I think there's a chance that Jaden McDaniel could still slide. I think there's a chance that, numerous other players that the Jazz might want would be possibly could slide at that point. Let's go to the next realm of this using the 38th pick of the draft that the Jazz now have on the draft. This is interesting. There's a lot of centers floating around here. Vernon Carey out of Duke, Daniel Otero out of Minnesota, the kid out of Kansas, Aduka Azubuike. There's a lot of young, those are Carey's 19. Azubuike is actually 21, 4 years, but only 21. Otero in Minnesota is just 21. Then there's also a bunch of fun little wings. Elijah Hughes, Syracuse, probably worth watching today. Emmanuel Quickly, who I've talked about a little bit recently, floating around there. Another center that's interesting is Reggie Perry out of Mississippi State. Does Taylor Bay out of Colorado slide to that realm? He probably does. Cassius Winston, Michigan State, pretty interesting player. This is why I think a lot of this is good. Jamias Ramsey, Texas Tech, interesting player. Like, I don't know that I think that Cassius Winston or Jamias Ramsey or some of these second or actually any of those bigs, second round pick for one of those bigs is a pretty good pick. Those, to me, adding the second round pick in this draft where I've watched guys and, I think part of the reason I like Robert Woodard so much is as much as I watch Josh Green and like him, I'm not certain. And I think he could be a nice player. I think he ideally could have fit really well next to Gordon. I mean, next to Donovan. Sorry, Gordon with all the stuff on the mind. Next to Donovan at 6'10" wingspan and things like that. But I'm also not certain he's got a handle. I didn't see him get on top of the cup. You've heard my breakdown on him. In a lot of ways, what I think you're seeing here is just another swing at it in a really, really flat draft. And the flat draft that you have allows you to go get a second round pick that's at least pretty interesting. Let's go back to one thing that we've been doing this whole time, which is the numbers in the category of numbers, because some of these late second round draft picks plug into this. I want to do one other thing. We'll get to the questions as well. The last thing we were going to do was creating. We never did that category. So let's do creating, and then let's go back and look at some of the other areas where some of these late second round draft picks that are now kind of on the top of our list or possibilities are now players that are going to be talked about. So if you've just tuned in because it's draft day, again, thank you. For the last few weeks, what we've been doing is I broke down all the players and their skill sets based on certain categories, one of which is the idea of the ability to create. So that's your percentage of shooting dribble off the dribble. So shooting off the bounce and percentage of shots you're able to get off the bounce. So let's look, and it was the last piece we left for today. I think it's actually often the most interesting. So let's take that and take a look at who was the best in that category of the draft prospects, and then we'll look at some of the other late second round draft numbers. Okay, the number one player off the bounce is Emmanuel Quickly. He should be available with that second round pick. Desmond Bane is number two. He could still be around with that first round pick. Number three is Cassius Winston. Cassius Winston's a pretty interesting pick to me. He's at Michigan State, point guard. He's 22 years old. He's 6'1". He's probably ready to play. He fits the mold of a Monty Morris or a Fred VanVleet, who's been very successful. Isaiah Joe, Arkansas, 6'5", off the bounce, just bombing three-point shooter. Grant Riller out of Charleston. Malachi Flynn, the little point guard. Is that simply where you go with your first round pick, because he's got great numbers across the board. He took 129 shots off the dribble. Desmond Bane took 110. Cassius Winston took 107. These are bona fide real numbers. Those are the guys in the 80th percentile. The next tier: Kira Lewis Jr., Tayshaun Alexander, Nate Nesmith, Cole Anthony, Elijah Hughes. So pretty interesting to kind of see that. Let's walk through some of these guys in the second round and what our numbers set on them, and we'll touch on that for you as we continue on today's show. As the Jazz have traded the 23rd pick, moved down to 27 and 38, and then we'll also take your questions as well. Today's show brought to you by my good friends over at Murdoch Hyundai at 4646 South State Street, also located in Logan and in Linden. If you're going to look for a car right now, take a look at the Hyundai and do it with the Murdochs. So Murdochs have been in Utah for over 80 years. The Hyundai is an absolutely marvelous car with all the safety bells and whistles at great price points. They've got super deals going on right now. They're donating boots to the young kids in the community who need boots, winter boots, all sorts of gifts to you as well. So if you're looking for a car right now, take a second, look at the Hyundai, and then do it with the Murdochs. In Logan, in Linden, and at 4646 South State Street. Email me first at dlock09@gmail.com so we can take care of you and give you the VIP experience. Today's show and today, the NBA Draft, is brought to you by Built Bar, because I'm going to need multiple Built Bars throughout the day to keep me going. I might need Built Go too. Built Bar, the most delicious protein bar on the market with incredible macros. You get low fat, you get low sugar, you get low carbs, and you get high protein with 100% real chocolate around the outside, and you get the fabulous, beautiful tasting Built Bar. I like the orange, surprisingly. That surprised me. I always think that's the one people fake and it's not good, but instead it's great. The mint brownie's a fan, the mint as well as the caramel brownie. Others like the peanut butter and the coconut almond. They say it tastes like an Almond Joy. Go check it out, BuiltBar.com. Promo code is Locked On for 20% off. That's promo code Locked On for 20% off. Tonight, Chad Ford returns to the NBA Big Board NBA Draft. It'll be on Locked On Live. Make sure you join us here for Chad Ford's analysis. I'll be hosting it with him as well. All right, let's look at second-round picks with some interesting numbers. Okay, I look at transition as athleticism, which I think is important at this point because of the fact that particularly if you're taking a second-round player. So the guys that are below 30 in the draft that have great numbers. By the way, you're probably getting yourself out of Jalen Smith also. Josh Green, Jalen Smith, two guys we looked at really early. No chance they slide. Minor chance they could have slid to 23. They probably don't slide any further. All right, elite level transition finishing players. Xavier Tillman out of Michigan State. A lot of people love the way he plays, what he does. So that's worth taking a look, remembering. Tayshaun Alexander, junior guard out of Creighton. Very strong. Elijah Hughes, 84th percentile transition finishing. Zeke Enjai, the center, 96%. Azubuike's through the roof because he dunked everything. He shot like 79% last year. Cassius Stanley and Emmanuel Quickly, 76%. Best isolation player in the entire draft, only 26 attempts, is Emmanuel Quickly. Cassius Winston, Michigan State, crafty, 22 years old, pretty good in isolation. Tayshaun Alexander shows up again. Isaiah Joe, 99th percentile. Desmond Bain, 97th percentile. Grant Riller, 108 isolation attempts. He's in the 87th percentile. Malachi Flynn, Jamias Ramsey, 87th percentile. Kind of like Jamias Ramsey. All right, pick and roll ball handlers of our group. Who are the best ones out there? Malachi Flynn, 96th percentile. Pick and roll play is a possibility. Desmond Bain, 85th still there. Isaiah Joe, 85th. Devon Dodson out of Kansas. Good little sophomore guard, can play. I watched a bunch of his games. Saw him play TCU. Looked really good. He and Azubuike were a fabulous combination. Just getting it up to Azubuike and letting him dunk. Cassius Winston, 84th percent. There it is again. That 21-year-old Michigan State guard. Emmanuel Quickly, 85th percentile. All right. Who are the best spot-up shooters out of this group? Cassius Winston, 97th percentile. Elijah Hughes, 85th percentile. Tayshaun Alexander, 84th. As I'm saying, these are all second-round picks that are now probably on the board for the Jazz second round, and that's pretty fabulous. Desmond Bain, 90th percentile. Grant Riller, 96th percentile. Malachi Flynn, 85th percentile. Best catch and shoot guys. We have Jamias Ramsey, 91st percentile. In the 80s, Malachi Flynn, as well as Jaden McDaniels. Trey Jones at the 82nd percentile. Cassius Winston, 92nd percentile. Peyton Pritchard out of Oregon, 90th percentile catch and shoot. Cassius Stanley out of Duke, 93rd percentile. I like the same similar numbers. I like open catch and shoot three is a thing. Cassius Stanley shows up again quickly. He's not as good. He's at 60%. Trey Jones, who's probably a first-round pick now, he's kind of vaulted up. Elijah Hughes shows up again out of Syracuse. 6'5" athlete, pretty interesting player. Killian Tilly shows up. Grant Riller shows up. Malachi Flynn, 94th percentile. Jamias Ramsey, 85th percentile. So you're hearing a lot of the same names, and then we have the off-the-bounce dribble guys we talked about just a moment ago. Malachi Flynn, 81st percentile. Jamias Ramsey, just 32nd percentile. A little concerning there. Grant Riller, 83rd percentile. Desmond Bain, 95th percentile off the bounce. Isaiah Joe, 89th percentile. Almost all of them were threes. Elijah Hughes, 72nd percentile. Cassius Winston, 90th percentile. And Emmanuel Quickly, 99th percentile. 19 of 32, just 32. My take on Emmanuel Quickly, he's the underused Kentucky player there. So, all right, let's get to the questions. I know that I bought a Twitch bot that's kind of taking control of some of our notes earlier. Let's see what we got. Hello to Nick and Raul. Who are we targeting with the new spot? Says Keel Marshall. I think we jumped on that, but I think it gives us some flexibility. Like, I think you might decide you're going to go get a big man. You might decide you're going to go get a point guard. You know, two positions in which I've talked about that I didn't think we would probably go to because there wasn't that big a route onto the floor, I think are now possibilities because particularly if it's a second-round pick. The other one I did talk about the other day that came up to me on this was the idea that, you know what, if you're not that certain on some of these guys, and it's probably not, you know, you're not that clear. I mean, frankly, for me to be as like enamored with a guy like Robert Woodard, who's got all sorts of flaws in his game, is a little bit of a statement that no one here is a set thing. And so if you do think that Malachi Flynn is a set thing for 15 minutes, or you do think that Xavier Tillman is a set thing for 18 minutes, or you do think that Zeke Njai out of Arizona is going to develop into a set thing for 15 or 18 minutes, then go point guard or center. And you now actually have even more flexibility to do that. So, you know, again, you know, we talked about Emmanuel Quickly, who I like. Is he better than Miona? Because they're pretty similar. You know, is he better than Rajon Tucker? They're not similar, but, you know, they're the same position. You got to know it. All right, let's go to Instagram. Polish Jazz says, these draft picks haven't played meaningful competition in 8 months. With that and the short turnaround season, should we lower expectations on all the draft picks? I think this is a great point, and I think the answer is yes. It's where I think what gets interesting. Let's say you have a Josh Green, 19 years old, great body, a little inexperienced. Jaden McDaniels, 19 years old, or you have a Desmond Bain, 22. If you're deciding between those two and you think you need something this year, I would find myself siding toward the 22-year-old player. Cassius Winston, Michigan State point guard. Like, he'll probably be able to play backup point guard minutes in the NBA right away. He's 22. He's experienced. He's not got an upside. You're not. Who's a physical marvel? Is there somebody that is just physically in this draft? Well, okay, Robert Woodard is. Azubuike is 7'2", 7'17" with 77 million wingspan. Like he could probably step in. Who else tested out like with the best physical measurements? So sorry, off the top of my head, I wasn't ready for that, but it's a great question, Polsha. So 21, 22-year-old with elite measurements. That guy's probably going to be able to step in and play 12, 14, 15 minutes a night, along the way. Danny Amos asked an important question. How's Jarrell Brantley progressing? I don't know the answer entirely. There are some contract things where he's got, I think he was still a two-way last year, so he's got to get guaranteed for the Jazz this year. He's not, I think there's some pieces of that puzzle that have to get straightened out for him contract-wise. But, he's interesting to me. I kind of like all in on Jarrell Brantley, and then when I try to figure out how I'm using him, I have a hard time. And so the one thing I would say to Brantley that I do think you have to figure out how you're going to use him, one. And then the second thing you have to figure out about him is, are the skills that you're using him for, is he the right guy on the floor to be doing it? The analogy I would give is Julius Randle, where you kind of love Julius Randle because he's 6'9" and can dribble, and he's 6'9" and can pass, and he's 6'9", except for the fact you actually have somebody else on the floor who should be doing all those things and probably does them better. And so that's sometimes how I feel about Brantley. I think Brantley can play the five, and he can handle. And it's so intriguing and exciting, and his skill set's amazing, and he's a natural passer. You can see it. But then I stop for a second. It's like, okay, but is that who I want? Like, I'd actually probably rather have a 6'3" point guard doing those things. So I get a little bit nervous on some of that. J. Brown 2427, who's from Twitch, who's always been very good, as Donovan Mitchell straight up for James Harden. Well, Zach Lowe talked about it. What about James Harden for Kyrie Irving? If you're Brooklyn, why wouldn't you just do that? Keep Spencer Dinwiddie. Maybe you have to throw Karis LeVert in. Why wouldn't you just do that? Giles303 on Instagram says, what about Cole Anthony in the first round? I think Cole Anthony's interesting because I think he got really stymied by North Carolina, and so that's an interesting player in a lot of ways. Let's go to Spencer Ward. Given the roster numbers, do you think the Jazz play on the NBA roster or will be G League guys for you? I think anybody we draft will be G League and NBA. You've heard Dennis talk about it a lot, how much he likes the fact that he has Salt Lake City stars and has everybody next door in his ability to be able to do that with his prospects. And so I think that's, I think that's real. Big Daddy 21 on Instagram, a 7-footer with a 41 vertical jump. Udoka Azubuike could be a beast. I mean, I don't have it in front of me. His numbers were unbelievable. Like I wonder how I can find it really quickly. NBA draft combine 2020. If you did not see this numbers, it was it is incredible. There were some, my guy Robert Woodard came out really well. Elias Ramsey came out pretty well with a 6'6". Quigley came out with a wings. Emmanuel Quigley came out with a 6'8" and a quarter wingspan. Elijah Hughes, who's 6'4" and 3/4, came out with a 6'7.5". Those were some of the standouts. Jalen Smith measured just 6'9", but 6'10" with shoes. Nobody plays without shoes. I always think that's stupid. But 7'2" wingspan. He was super impressive in that regard. Udoka Azubuike, 6'10", 6'7" feet with shoes. Like, so stupid. 9'5" standing reach and 7'7" and a quarter wingspan is what that was. I don't have the vertical. You're right. The vertical numbers were like equally as kind of amazing. So I apologize. I don't have that, but yeah, it was. Let me see if I think Tyler Bay and Udoka set the record for NBA Here's Jonathan Giovanni tweeted out, Udoka Azubuike registered the highest standing vertical in the NBA combine history among centers at 37 inches, partially explained why he had the best field goal percentage in college basketball history with a combined wingspan of 7'1". Then Jonathan Weiserman tweeted out, Kyler Bay set an NBA combine record for forwards with a 43.5-inch max vertical jump. So Tyler Bay, interesting player, Colorado, 6'7" with shoes, 7'1" wingspan, 8'9" standing reach, 37 no step vertical, 43.5 max vertical. You got to be able to play, right? Like you can do all these things, but if you can't play, it doesn't matter. But those were probably, and Quickly and Woodard were probably the standouts on Instagram, based on savings from trading down a few slots and being able to add a body at the second minimum. Could the Jazz re-sign Clarkson and use the full mid-level now and avoid the tax? I didn't know we were that tight, but we have saved a little money today. And we save a little bit more if you'd like use the second round draft pick instead of Nigel Williams-Goss or Rajon Tucker. You know what? I'll be honest. I'm not as well prepared on that as I should be. I don't know us to the dollar like that. How do you feel about Devon Dodson? Do you think he could fall to us? Point guard, Kansas, sophomore, like him. This is an example. Cassius Winston, Devon Dodson. Like these are second round picks. I think are going to be able to play in the league. Sam Vecini of The Athletic on the podcast somewhere recently said that he thought there were 45 guaranteed contracts in this deal, which in this draft, which is a huge amount. So I think that, I think Dotson's totally in play. Like I watched those, as I said, I watched TCU Kansas because I was watching Bain. He's nice. He comes out that pick and roll. He knows how to play. He's good. What do you think of Udoka or Nico Mannion for this roster? Well, we just talked about Udoka Azubuike. I've only watched him a little. I don't know much about him. Nico Mannion, I'm curious on Nico Mannion on a positive and a negative. He's so quick with the ball. He's got great vision. He's truly a point guard. If you put him in the NBA open floor, does he become even better? And he can push it and really play. He did get bogarted for his lack of size and lack of strength a bunch of times. And when I watched him, and because college still likes to go in the post, will people do that to him in the NBA? I'm not entirely sure. NBA draft coverage tonight. Live, 6:40. Let's see. Our time would be, it's 8 o'clock, so 5:45 Mountain Time, 7:45 Eastern. Chad Ford and I will start right here on Locked On Live, take you through every single pick. The local experts will stop by to analyze their picks. There's nobody who can do it better than the Locked On Podcast Network, so make sure you're a part of us for that tonight on Locked On Live on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and Periscope. Let's continue with the questions on the show here. Are we moving on from Ed Davis or keeping him as a locker room presence? It's from Ashton. I don't know the answer to that. I would tell you two things on Ed. One is unbelievable locker room presence, like unbelievable locker room presence. Number two is the fact that I think that it was so strange what happened to him last year. It was just like his legs never came out for the season. And I just wonder if he'll be better this year. He just has a track record of being such a better player than he was last year. I wonder whether or not he'd just be a better, like it's almost like I feel like he can't have just something weird happened last year. I kind of feel like and he's such an amazing dude. So if we kept Ed Davis, I'd be all good with it. I'd be happy with Woodard or Bay in the first round, Flynn and Hughes in the second. I don't think you can get Flynn in the second round. I actually think you have a better chance of maybe getting Bay in the second round, but I don't know. Elijah Hughes is interesting out of Syracuse. I'm going to watch him some more. He's developed nicely over the last few years. It's always hard to watch Syracuse because they play zone, so it's tough to see what they're doing. I like Woodard. We'll see. It's kind of a joke at this point, but I just like the body. Like I just love the body and athleticism. There's not a lot of the game to get to love. So let me be honest about that. The Jazz should have waited. If Alexei Pokusevski is there, you take him. 7 feet, 200 pounds. I'm not a fan of unicorns. I'm pretty consistent on this. I like bodies. I like the guys who have the measurements. I think the league's getting bigger, not smaller. And so, sure, he's unique at 7 feet and 200. He can go behind his back and he can shoot threes. And unless he's going to be Duncan Robinson in some way, again, I wonder if there's somebody else who should be doing those things than him on the board. So we'll see. Hello from Sweden. Nice to see you. Spencer Ward, do you think Xavier Tillman can play the 4? To me, he seems like Favors, but hopefully he's able to develop a three-pointer. I probably need to watch him more. Everyone I know who's watched him loves the way he plays, loves the way he passes, loves the way he moves. People inside the league are experts on the Locked On Podcast Network. In what, Brad Rowland and Josh Lloyd on our Locked On NBA mock draft talked about him being the player they thought was most comfortable having a 10-year career. So I think, I think that everyone seems to really like him. I don't know if he can play the 4 or the 5. He can pass it. He can move it. He's smart. He plays inside the system. So I suspect he'll, everyone thinks he's got a 10-year career. He might be. Xavier Tillman just might be the perfect example of what we've been talking about all day, that you've just traded down. You're taking him at 27. You knew you were going to take him at 27. He's going to be there the whole time. I have no idea. I'm just saying, and so you're going to get him. You now got, and he's going to have a 10-year career, and he's going to be a 15 to 18-minute a night player. That's a great pick. 50% of picks after the 11th pick of the NBA draft do not become NBA rotation players. 50% of the players 11 through 30 do not become NBA rotation players. Who are we drafting tonight? Says George Niang. Give us the scoop. Better not be a shooting 4 off the bench, man. Can't have that. I got my guy for that already. Can George Niang become the latest Davis Bertans and Duncan Robinson and get 8-9 threes off in a game? Need probably more than 15 minutes a night to get 8 or 9 off, or else you are really chucking, buddy. How are you? I hope you're good. I miss you. Thanks for checking in. You're the best. George Niang is the guy I actually miss as much as anyone since COVID. I always walk in the gym. He's always like, David Locke. Makes you smile. That's what George Niang does. Seriously, though, a little bit on George. Like, I've been obsessed with trying to find the player who can do what Davis Bertans and Duncan Robinson did last year, which is at 6'7" or taller, be able to get off 8 or 9 threes a game, and it's interesting. Boyan's actually pretty close to being that guy. I talked about Doug McDermott on the show the other day, and someone pointed out to me, like, what about, can't George Niang do the same thing? Yeah, probably 100%. So I've kind of been obsessed with this 6'8", 6'9", when boom, 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 just get them off. Like, I think that's a hugely valuable piece to this league that people aren't talking about. There isn't really that guy in the draft, if you're asking that question. You have to really learn NBA speed. One thing I think that's interesting, like when I think about George, is change his shot. We're talking about you. Now you check in. Now it's this quick, the minivan's this quick release, not a lot of jump shot. I watch some of these college kids, and they've got such elevation in their lane. But as you back up in the lane and get deeper and have to take a deeper three, and as the league gets faster, you don't have the time to do that. And then when you think about someone like Grayson Allen, who's a real jumper on his shot, like jumps up on his jump shot, well, that's why Grayson goes 5 of 6 one night and 0 for 5 the next. There's so many body parts moving. Robert Woodard, who we've talked a lot about in this draft, huge jumper. Can a developmental coach do what George Niang did, which is learn how to just get that shot off as a quick spot? So he's so strong, and do you have the touch to be able to do it? You've got, let's not forget that George is one of the great scorers in the history of Iowa State. So you have to be a natural scorer to be able to do it and be able to adjust your game in that manner. Wow, that was fun. We just started talking about my guy there for a little while. Is there a possibility to trade the second-round pick and Ed Davis today? Yeah. I think there's somebody who would take so I'm going to be a little bit off on this because this is about 3 years old information, but I should check it, and I'll check it and see if, watch me on Twitter today at Locked On Sports. I believe you can only spend $3 million in acquiring picks. That's my old memory. It might be you can only spend $3 million over a course of a year in acquiring players. So if you were to trade David Locke and David James for Patrick Kinahan, and they had to throw in $3 million because we're way better than Patrick Kinahan, then they couldn't send any more money in for any other players the rest of the year. That's my memory, is $3 million. I think picks count for that as well. So what has happened is that second-round picks have become more expensive than that $3 million. They've been hard to get. And teams don't want it. Teams would rather have the player than the $3 million. Now, with the economic crisis and pandemic, that might be changing. But what you're really saying is you can have a second-round pick and Ed Davis, and that second-round pick is now $5 million, is what you just said. And so they're taking the $5 million of Ed Davis's contract next year with that second-round pick. That actually matches the math of what's going on for value of picks right now. Do you think the 2020-21 NBA regular season comes out during the draft tonight? No. I didn't touch on this because we have the draft and we have the trade. I'm really surprised by a lot of parts of that yesterday. I'm really surprised that we're playing as many out-of-conference games as we always do. I thought it was going to be limited travel and really playing inside the West the whole time and a murderer's row of teams across your division. And it's actually much more balanced schedule across the board. It's frankly opening up the possibility of just take the 16 best playoff teams. So I was a little surprised by that. Ryan Johnson, would Elijah Hughes be a good insurance blanket if Clarkson leaves, and do they have similar games? No one has a similar game with Jordan Clarkson. I don't think any of these guys, we should be expecting them to play a role of like 20 minutes a night or 25 minutes a night on Clarkson. I mean, the interesting one on Clarkson is if everyone's healthy. And so Donovan's playing 34, Conley's playing 29, Joe's playing 29, Royce is playing 30. There's actually not a huge amount of minutes there for Jordan if that five-man rotation. It's about 24. Now, if somebody gets hurt, Jordan's shown he can do all those various things, and he plays over 30, so he's certainly valuable. But I don't think you can really – I don't actually think anyone we're drafting today – Cassius Winston, Michigan State, little point guard, maybe. Desmond Bane, 22-year-old TCU, maybe. Like, I don't think there's a lot of players who we're going to draft tonight who are actually going to step in right away and do that. Everyone wants me to just tell you who we're picking. I don't know. I don't know. Do I think the Jazz are interested in Rodney Hood? I don't know. I was really surprised that Rodney Hood stepped out of that contract last night, coming off an Achilles tendon. I don't know. I love Rodney. It would be hard for me to pay for a guy coming off an Achilles tendon who I haven't seen play. See what we got. Anything left? I'm hearing a lot of people talking to trade Joe. Do you feel the same way? Our team's pretty darn good when Joe Ingles is on the floor, and Joe Ingles is playing well, and probably our best defensive player, and he's one of our best playmakers. You better have you better be making a major transition to who you are as a team if you're going to move Joe Ingles, I would say. That to me would be, you better really know what you're going to get there. At 33 years old, his aging is a little unnerving about what's going to happen when he ages. But he's, there aren't many signs of that right now. And so one of the questions you'd have to ask is he aging any less because he played less early, didn't play the massive NBA minutes, came to the league later? Does that mean he's going to be able to age a little differently? All right, that is Locked On Jazz today. Thanks very much for tuning in tonight. Join me for the live draft show. Follow me on Twitter at Locked On Sports. We'll have a bunch of polls, a lot of fun today. So stay engaged. Appreciate you. Oh, and I even did one of those new Twitter things, whatever they're called. Have a good one. See you.